If you love me, please don't judge me. Got my hands tied, the power's above me. Don't shoot the messenger, I'm just a puppet here. If you wanna place blame, then look to the puppeteer. Family, fortune, envy, jealousy, privilege, passed on, legacy, secret, sabotage, borderline, felony, suicide, subtract, selfish, pedigree, yeah.
How's it going, everybody? C-RadTV back here with another video. So, of course, it's time to continue on the next part of the What If NASCAR Had F1 Point series. So, the last time in the series, we took a look at the Xfinity / Busch series in the 1990s to see what would have changed under the F1 points format. And a couple things have changed, but a few things stayed the same. And in this part, we even had a couple Leach championships in the last part to start off the run of cup leaching. And in this part, we're going to continue on this series by looking at the 2000s to see what would have changed in the Busch / Xfinity / Nationwide series, since the series would be called the Nationwide series starting in 2008. And be warned, folks, the cup leaching is about to get worse than it did in the last part. Just bear with it. So anyway, for this part, I'll show both points formats I'm going to use in this part. I went over both these formats when we went over the Cup side, the F1 of the What If NASCAR Had F1 Points format in the 2000s. So check that part out if you want clarification on this, since I already went over these points formats, where the format would change in 2003 to top 8 finishers. But yeah, anyway, and before we continue on, let me once again stress out that this is just a hypothetical scenario. I know everybody would have raced each other differently had this format been in play. This is just for fun. So now, with all that out of the way, let's move on to the video. So the 2000 season, it was all about Jeff Green. Just Jeff Green was flat out consistent all year, had speed all year, like nobody was on his level in 2000, and Jeff Green, he just flat out ran away with the championship since his only competition was cup leaches, which just gave Green an easy path to the championship. So Green would still win the championship in 2000. So, 2001, we had a close 3-man battle for the championship between Kevin Harvick, Greg Biffle, and Jeff Green. Biffle and Green, both of them would fail to be consistent late in the season when it mattered the most. Jeff Green would be eliminated with around 2 races to go in the season. Greg Biffle and Hart would fail to be consistent when it mattered, and Kevin Harvick, he would lock up the championship with a week to go in the season. So Kevin Harvick would win the 2001 championship while also running in the Cup Series full-time, subbing in for after the passing of Dale Earnhardt. And of course, 14 years later under the F1 points format, as you saw in the Cup Series side of the F1 of the What If series, Harvick would go on to win a Cup championship at least, which would make Harvick later on the 3rd driver to win both a Cup and an Xfinity title in their career. So the 2002 season, it was all about Greg Biffle. Biffle was just flat out dominant, flat out fast and consistent. The only driver close to him was Jason Keller, but there were many times in the season where Keller failed to be consistent when it mattered the most, and Greg Biffle just pulled away, and Biffle would go on and cruise to the 2002 Busch Series championship. So the 2003 championship would have been an extremely close championship. This championship, it would have came down to the final race of the season, and it would have been between 5 drivers. Those 5 drivers being Bobby Hamilton Jr., Brian Vickers, Kevin Harvick, David Green, and Scott Riggs. All 5 entered with it separated by a total of 9 points. And Vickers entered with a 1-point lead over Bobby Hamilton Jr. So in the season finale at Homestead, Miami, Scott Riggs, he would be involved in an early race crash. He was the long shot favorite to win the championship. His crash, he would end up finishing near the back with that crash, so he would be eliminated from the championship as a result. Brian Vickers, he struggled most of the day and ended up finishing outside the top 10 and 11th. But Vickers' championship would not be done yet. But for David Green, he would finish just outside the points in 9th, which would eliminate David Green from the championship. Kevin Harvick was unable to do what he needed to do to win the championship. Harvick would end up finishing 2nd, which would knock him out of the title hunt. So for Bobby Hamilton Jr., all Bobby Hamilton had to do to win the championship was finish 3rd or better in the season finale at Homestead, and he would beat out Vickers. Or he would need to gain at least 1 point on Vickers. In the end, Bobby Hamilton Jr. was able to do just that. He was able to finish 3rd in the season finale at Homestead, which would be enough for Bobby Hamilton Jr. to win the championship over Brian Vickers by 5 points. So Bobby Hamilton Jr. would be your 2003 Busch Series champion under this format. So the 2004 championship, it would have been a 3-man battle for the title between Martin Truex Jr., Greg Biffle, and Kyle Busch. All 3 were close with each other all season. Late in the season, though, Kyle Busch would fail to be consistent when it mattered the most, and he'd be eliminated with a couple races to go in the season. Meanwhile, Greg Biffle and Truex were neck and neck, but Biffle would fail to be consistent late in the year when it mattered the most. And Martin Truex Jr. would pull away, and he would win the championship and lock it up with a race to go in the season. So Martin Truex Jr. would still be the 2004 Busch Series champion. So the 2005 Busch Series Championship, it was a close 2-man championship between Martin Truex Jr. and Carl Edwards. Both of them were neck and neck with each other all season. This championship battle would end up going down to the season finale at Homestead, Miami, where Truex would enter with a 7-point lead over Carl Edwards. In the season finale at Homestead, Miami, Carl Edwards would struggle at Homestead, Miami, which is very shocking to hear considering that Carl Edwards usually runs well at Homestead. But Carl, on this day, would struggle at Homestead and end up finishing mid-pack in 19th, while Martin Truex, which would hand Martin Truex Jr. the championship by default. But even then, Truex still did everything he needed to win the to lock up the title. Truex would end up finishing 7th in the season finale, which would allow Truex to win the championship over Carl Edwards by 9 points. I also forgot to mention from the 2004 season that for Martin Truex Jr., he would go on later on in the What If series, if you keep track, he would go on a decade later in 2017 and 2019, and Martin Truex Jr. would also win 2 Cup titles under this format later on. So Martin Truex Jr. would then become the 4th driver to win both the Cup championship and an Xfinity/Busch Series championship in their careers. So the 2006 season, it was all about Kevin Harvick. Harvick was flat out dominant all year in terms of speed and consistency, the whole 9 yards. Like, nobody was on Harvick's level in 2006. And Kevin Harvick, he would easily cruise to his 2nd Busch Series championship. And yeah, from here on out, this is when the Cup leeching really gets bad. 2006, this is when Cup leeching really took off, and it really got out of control for about a decade. So the 2007 championship, it was down between 4 drivers between Carl Edwards, Matt Kenseth, Kyle Busch, and Kevin Harvick. It would come down to the 2007 season finale at Homestead, Miami between all 4 drivers. However, though, for the season finale, Kyle Busch, who did enter with a chance to win, Kyle Busch, of course, was in the middle of a nasty split between him and Rick Hendrick and Hendrick Motorsports. And before the season even ended, Kyle Busch would be kicked out of the 5 car for the Xfinity Series, and the 5 car for the season finale would be driven by Mark Martin, the original Kane Leach. So Kyle Busch was unable to get a ride, and as a result, that would eliminate Kyle Busch by default from the championship. So it was realistically then down to 3 drivers in the finale. In the finale, Kevin Harvick, he struggled throughout the race at Homestead and would finish mid-pack in 16th. Carl Edwards and Matt Kenseth were close with each other all race. Matt Kenseth would end up finishing 3rd in the season finale, but Carl Edwards stayed close behind him as he had to win the championship. Carl Edwards would end up finishing 4th in the season finale, and that would be enough for Carl Edwards to edge out Matt Kenseth for the 2007 Busch Series Championship by only 3 points. And of course, later on in this What If series, as if you've been keeping track, Carl Edwards in 2008 and 2011, he would go on and win the Cup title under the F1 points format. So under the F1 points format, Carl Edwards would become the 5th driver to win both the Cup title and a Busch/Xfinity championship in their careers. So the 2008 Nationwide Series Championship battle would have been a 2-man battle for the championship between Kyle Busch and Carl Edwards. Both of them were neck and neck with each other all season. But late in the season, Carl Edwards would fail to be consistent when it mattered the most, while Kyle Busch would take advantage and pull away from Carl. And Kyle Busch would end up locking up the Nationwide Series Championship at Texas after a win at Texas with 2 races to go in the season. So Kyle Busch would win his first Nationwide Series Championship. Now, Carl Edwards would win the last 2 races of the season, but all that did was just make the championship look a lot closer than it actually did. And of course, Kyle Busch, if you've been keeping track with the series, Kyle Busch in 2016 and 2018, Kyle Busch would later on in the What If series would go on to win 2 Cup Series championships under the F1 points format. But even though Kyle Busch won the Nationwide Series championship over Carl Edwards under this format would get the last laugh on the Cup side and win the Cup championship over Kyle Busch in 2008. So Kyle Busch may have won the Nationwide title, but Carl Edwards got the real trophy in 2008. So the 2009 season, it was all about Kyle Busch in the Nationwide Series. Like, Kyle Busch was on his own level in the Nationwide Series in 2009. Just nobody had an answer for him. Carl Edwards tried to keep it close, but Carl just couldn't be consistent enough when it mattered the most over Kyle Busch. And Kyle Busch would end up pulling away to his second Xfinity/Nationwide Series championship. And folks, get used to Kyle Busch dominating in the Nationwide/Xfinity Series from here on out. Because it was around this time where Kyle Busch's reign of bullshit in the Xfinity Series begins. But yeah, anyway, that's going to wrap it up here for this What If series, for this part of the What If series. So, of course, a lot of things stayed the same, but a couple things changed. In terms of title changes, we had 2 title changes which took place in 2003 and 2008. We had 3 championship battles go down to the season finale. And we had, in terms of Leach championships, we had every championship from 2006 to 2009 was a Leach title. No, I really don't count Kevin Harvick's 2001 championship as a Leach title, even though he competed full-time in the Cup Series. But Harvick only competed full-time in 2001 in Cup because of Dale Earnhardt's passing, and Harvick was thrown in as a last-minute replacement. So for 2001, I'll give Harvick a pass. But yeah, anyway, quite a few things stayed the same actually for the most part in this. So the next part of this What If series we'll wrap up the Xfinity side of this What If series before we move on to trucks by looking at the 2010s to see how bad the leaching would be and how much would change under the F1 points format in Xfinity / Nationwide series. And yeah, so that final part will come out depending on how fast I get the research done and everything. But yeah, that's going to wrap it up here. That's all I got to say. I'll see you on whatever I make next. Peace out.